pray God that I may deserve this opportunity to serve our country. In all humility, I accept the nomination.
The beggar man and the mighty king are only different in that.
Tom Dewey, on the other hand, is dashing and experienced. As New York's gang-busting district attorney from the Depression, and now the governor of the Empire State, Roosevelt country, Dewey's the best-known Republican in the land. Young, short, but stylish.
Like I, hold your head up high.
A man who can strut while sitting down.
I pledge to you that on next January 20, there will begin in Washington the biggest unraveling, unsnarling, untangling operation in our nation's history.
There are other candidates, but with Truman's luck, 2 of them are from his own party.
Henry A. Wallace, pacifist leader of the Progressive Party, which attracted left-wing support. J. Strom Thurmond of the States' Rights Party, opposing the president's civil rights program.
Well, we were making the fight in the 1948 campaign on the basis of federal power versus state power. It was not a racist fight so far as we were concerned.
That there's not enough troops in the Army to force the Southern people to break down segregation and admit the Negro race into our theaters, into our swimming pools, into our homes, and into our churches.
It's not that Thurmond or Wallace is expected to win. It's that they are expected to get just enough votes to make it certain Truman will lose. Newspaperman H.L. Mencken writes, "I'm inclined to think Dewey is the best candidate. Thurmond is handicapped by having the worst morons of the South for him. Wallace has the communist around his neck. And as for the Honorable Mr. Truman," writes Mencken, "it is only his immense unfitness for the job that got him the nomination." Truman sees it differently. And so on Labor Day, September 6th, he takes off in this train, in this car, the Ferdinand Magellan. He's not so much doing battle with the other candidates as he is taking his case to the people, who will ultimately decide.
We gotta get going, where are we going, what are we gonna do?
We're on our way to somewhere, the 3 of us and you. What'll we see there, who will be there, what'll be the big surprise?
There may be caballeros with dark and flashing eyes.
2 weeks later, Governor Dewey leaves on his own train. Naturally, it's called the Victory Special.
We won't come back.
We won't come back, how can we go? We haven't got a dime, but we're going, and we're gonna have a happy time.
Truman's first major speech is in Dexter, Iowa, the site of the national plowing matches. The man in charge is Herbert Plambeck, farm director at radio station WHO in Des Moines.
People came streaming in. They were there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Buses came, and we knew we had quite a day on our hands.
A friend takes colored pictures of the historic occasion because Herb has been chosen to greet the president.
Now, I must tell you, that's a bit of a heady experience for a country boy. We arrived there amidst that tremendous throng of people. They were 10 deep on each side of the car. Mr. Truman was just delighted. It was obvious that this was his kind of a party. And he met my mother, who had come there. My father was a little bit reluctant to come in there. He was a good Republican, and he didn't know whether this was for him or not. But my mother had no such qualms.
Ladies and gentlemen,
I was chosen to do the introduction.
the President of the United States.
She started out very presidential and very patriotic, but not very long. His object was to give a message to the 80th Congress, and he did.
The Wall Street reactionaries are not satisfied with being rich. They want to increase their power and their privileges. They are gluttons of privilege. This Republican Congress has already stuck a pitchfork in the farmer's back.
Our people were listening, and they were considering what would be best for them, and they found that here in this particular circumstance, Mr. Truman was looking a lot better than way down in last place.
All right, I'm doing it.
Tom Dewey wouldn't think of giving anybody hell.
You had the whole momentum, you had the whole atmosphere of being on the winning ticket.
Clifton White was on the executive committee of Youth for Dewey.
Polls, which of course were very new, all said Dewey would win. But what was equally important, all politicians and all newspaper people said he was going to win. Real estate people, they were selling their houses in Washington to Dewey's cabinet.
But when Dewey's personal secretary, Lillian Ross, screens his mail, she finds concern.
At that time, Truman was doing a lot of bombasting against the governor, and they couldn't understand his not answering him in kind.
Dewey has been advised not to match barbs with the underdog.
We believe in honesty, loyalty, fair play, concern for our neighbors, the innate ability of men to achieve.
Be cool, his advisors say. Don't blow it.
By our faith in God are the inner meaning of the American way of life.
Harold Stassen has campaigned for Dewey across the country.
By holding back on these issues, he gave an impression of sort of talking above the people and not being decisive. So finally, in about the first part of October, I went up to see Governor Dewey, and I told him, I don't like what I hear around the country. I said, I think you've got to take stronger stands. And he smiled and opened up this drawer of his desk. I could just see him today. He pulled out of there and handed me, without a word, a Roper pole. And I looked at it, and it showed a, incredible lead for Dewey.
But that's old news. Elmo Roper and his son Burns have stopped taking polls because Elmo said so.
He felt, based on his experience, that nothing changed after Labor Day. That all of the volatility was before the candidates were nominated, and once they were both nominated and squared off, opinion was decided and nothing happened.
Other polls continued, though. The results of a Newsweek poll of 50 political experts reaches Harry Truman on his train.
Truman 0, Dewey 50. Not one of the 50 experts polled felt that Truman could win. I got back on the train. I had to walk through the president's car to get to my berth. I had it under my coat, and he said, I think you've got a copy of Newsweek there, and I had to show it to him. He took a look at it. He says, not one of those fellas has enough sense to know what the hell he's doing.
Election day is wet and gloomy in Missouri.
Whether skies are gray or blue.
This is Frank Burkholzer in Independence, Missouri. The official word is that in a little while, Mr. Truman will try to forget the 1948 elections and get some sleep.
In Chicago, the Tribune comes out with its famous headline, against the advice of political reporter Walter Trohan.
Dewey defeats Truman. It was positive. There was no welching on it at all, or no way to retreat from it.
By 9 o'clock, the paper is on the streets. In the fall of 1948, I was a sophomore at Northwestern University here in Evanston, Illinois. I didn't vote in that election. 18-year-olds did not have the franchise then. I kind of liked Harry Truman, but my interest was tepid at best in the election. I was kind of sorry that he was going to lose. Anyway, on election night, I was out somewhere, don't remember where. I was returning home to my Quonset hut lodgings about 11 o'clock at night, passed a newsstand, looked down, and there was that early edition of the Chicago Tribune. Dewey defeats Truman. Well, I said, that figures. I clucked my tongue and went on home and never bought the paper. In New York City, at Dewey headquarters, Lillian Ross looks for her husband, Alan Goodridge, who is tracking the vote.
The corridors were jammed with men and women in evening clothes with champagne in their hand, talking and laughing and celebrating already. I could hardly get through to get to his room, but I finally managed to get there, and I walked in. He was sitting behind his desk, and he was as white as a sheet. And I said, Goody, what's wrong? And he never answered me. And finally, one of his men came from across the hall. I said, what's wrong with Goody? He doesn't answer me. He said, well, I'm sure he knows the governor has lost the election. This was about 8:15.